Next up we have Miss Lauren Glasco.
Hi everybody. So I can clearly remember years ago I showed up to school early one day and I was bleary-eyed, and it was both due to the fact that it was insanely early, I was a teenager, and because I had been crying. I know I was dressed in sweatpants, probably layered over some sort of gym uniform or practice clothes, and I somewhat stumbled my way up the stairs and into my AP chemistry teacher's classroom. He was sitting at a lab table where I knew he would be, and so as I rounded the corner, he looked up at me, and before I could start crying again, I said, "I'm going to live under a bridge." And at this point, you're probably thinking, due to my appearance and my fatigue, that maybe that was the case. But in fact, I had a sturdy home, I had a supportive family, and I had a really messy teenage bedroom. But the problem was that I had received a 42% on my first AP chemistry test. And that was after the curve. So it was a pretty bad day. Little did I know at the time that I would recover. I recommitted myself to studying. I recruited some friends to join me, and we studied each week. And I started asking more questions, and I asked my teacher more questions than he was equipped to handle without starting to show some annoyance, which I now understand even more. So unfortunately, I'm now his opening day story to his students. The girl who failed the first test so badly that she thought she was going to live under a bridge for the rest of her life. But fortunately, he and I both think that's a little bit funny now. And even more fortunately, I had experienced enough positive results with tests and with learning and with school that I didn't own that failure as a part of my identity. It wasn't who I was. And that's my big point. Failure is an experience, not an identity. Luckily for me, many of my failures happened after I had formed a strong sense of my identity. And luckily for me, I did that early. I knew early on who I was, a tomboy in cut-off white sweatpants, and who I wasn't, a ballerina. And because of that, I was able, as I grew older and with more experiences, encountered more failures, to not own them as who I was. Now, just to clarify, I'm not saying I haven't had a lot of failures. I certainly have. And as a matter of fact, when I sat down to puzzle out my thoughts for tonight, I made a list of my failures. So here we go, I'll be quick. It's long. One, Trivial Pursuit. My husband and I were going for the win. No one ever beats my father at Trivial Pursuit. And the question was, where is Rutgers? And I was confident that it was in New York. It's not. It's in New Jersey, and we lost. One-on-one basketball, again with my husband, he challenged me to a game. He spotted me 11 points. I hit a 3, it's 14-0. And I lost, 15-14. In college, tripping in front of the window of treadmills. So people are staring out the window, looking for anything to entertain themselves in their misery. Me, flat on my face. Diving out of bounds in a high school basketball game after the other team touched it last. And it happened to be HSE. Tripping at college graduation, thank you, President Casey, for my diploma trip. Left-handed layups, I convinced myself that I could no longer make one. That was 3 hours of extra work after practice. A train in Switzerland, I was on a study abroad trip, and I boarded the train with lots of heavy luggage, and I rode for 3 hours into Germany, the wrong direction. The time that I kicked my sister, because I was really mad at her, and then I yelled, "Mom, Erin kicked me," while she stood there with a giant red mark on her chin going like this. Not a good lie. The time that I refused to eat chicken wings at dinner, let's just say that didn't end well, and I may have been drugged over the kitchen table through the chicken wings. But at this point in my list, I made a note to myself that said, what about the big ones? What about the failures that hurt? These failures, I can list them flippantly. I use them as jokes. I tell them as stories to make people laugh. In fact, my favorite author, Donald Miller, the point that mistakes and failures create the conflict in our lives and allow us to tell or to live a good story. But human beings are hardwired to not remember our mistakes. So we we remember them under labels, but we put them under euphemisms for being wrong. And Catherine Schultz explains this in her book titled Being Wrong. What she says is that we don't remember our mistakes. We don't put them under that label. We label them as times when I was embarrassed or angry or lonely or sad. But I had challenged myself, what about the big ones, the big mistakes? And so my list carries on. I remember in 5th or 6th grade, I talked about a girl behind her back. Almost literally, she was standing over here, and I don't know whether it was in an effort to look cool or out of annoyance or to make myself feel better about something, but I said some hurtful things and then looked up and knew she had heard everything I said. It was really hard to forgive myself for that one. I played softball in college, and I started as a freshman at second base. And through a series of events, and some of them my own choices, and after studying abroad my junior year, I came back my senior year, and one of my dear friends who was an underclassman started in second base my senior year while I sat on the bench. Or my freshman year of college, I took intro to econ, and I got my very first B, which isn't a failure, but it sure felt like one at the time, that first time that I didn't get an A. And these failures, they changed me. But what is perhaps more important is who and what they didn't change. My parents still loved me and reminded me to take my vitamins every single day. My brother and sisters still pinned me to the ground and teased me. My friends still supported me and wanted to spend time with me. Failure is an experience, not an identity. As a culture, I would argue that we suffer from a mistaken understanding of what it means to be wrong. And Catherine Schultz actually calls this our meta mistake. We are wrong, she says, about what it means to be wrong. We assume we are basically right, basically all the time about basically everything. And this is serious and scary because accepting our mistakes is how we learn and grow. That's how we make sense of who we are. That's how we figure out what's going on in the world. And that's how we figure out what it means to be a human being. Schultz points out that mistakes are how we reveal some of our most humane and honorable qualities. Empathy, optimism, imagination, conviction, and courage. Who wouldn't want to be those things? But in order to be those things, we have to be wrong sometimes. Today, as a teacher, I aspire to help create a culture in my classroom where students are encouraged to take risks, and they might have to experience a failure as they do. And I do this in a variety of ways, but there will be assignments where I ask them a question and I give them full creative license in how they answer it, and they have to take a risk to figure out what works. They have to collaborate every day, and they engage in productive conflict. We define this as respectfully challenging someone else's ideas and maybe telling them in a nice way that they're wrong. That's a risk. That's hard. They have to share their writing in front of a group of people. That's a challenge. They have to come up with genius hour projects. They're making their proposals right now, and some of them are really incredible and really ambitious. And these students know that they might fail, and they're doing it anyway. They have to verbalize a thought process. They have to present in front of a group of their peers. All of these are risks, and they might fail. But that's important because they'll need to be equipped with an identity that's strong enough so that when they encounter failures in their future, they'll know that they'll go from that failure across a bridge into a new understanding of the world around them. For me, it's a good thing that I'm not living under a bridge because I don't do bugs or dirt too well. That chemistry test, it's water under the bridge at this point. But Schultz talks about this idea of making mistakes so eloquently that I wanted to share it with you tonight. To err is to wander, and wandering is the way we discover the world. And lost in thought, it is also the way we discover ourselves. Being right might be gratifying, but in the end it is static, a mere statement. Being wrong is hard and humbling, and sometimes even dangerous. But in the end, it is a journey and a story. I know I'll still have to bridge the gap of my future failures, but I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. It's my job right now to make sure that my students leave my classroom with an identity that's strong enough that when they face failures in the future, and they will, they know that they're going to get